Documented patrol logs. Authentic visual evidence. Absolute truth. This is Bodycam incident reports.
Officer, we have policies here. People like him don't just walk in and start touching $100,000 vehicle.
You didn't ask my name. You didn't ask if I had financing.
Ma'am, are you saying you denied him access without checking anything?
Look at him. Does he look like someone buying a $115,000 SUV?
That's a cashier's check.
The footage you are watching is a masterclass in how implicit bias can destroy a career in under 10 minutes. In the world of high-end retail, discrimination rarely looks like shouting or blatant insults. It looks like store policy. It looks like a salesperson deciding your net worth and your right to be there, based entirely on the color of your skin and the fabric of your clothes. Before we break down this footage, let us know in the comments. What city or country are you watching from? Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get into it. The setting is North Shore Motors, a premier dealership specializing in the top-tier German luxury SUVs. The floors are polished white marble, the lighting is clinical and bright, and the average vehicle on the floor carries a sticker price of over $100,000. It was a quiet Saturday morning when Desmond Ross walked through the heavy glass doors. Desmond is a highly successful entrepreneur who built a regional logistics company from the ground up. But on his days off, he dresses for comfort. On this particular morning, he was wearing a high-quality but plain black hoodie, athletic joggers, and clean running shoes. In his pocket was a thick white envelope. He wasn't there to browse. He had come to purchase the flagship matte black SUV as an anniversary gift for his wife. Desmond bypassed the entry-level sedans near the reception desk and walked directly to the center of the showroom, stopping next to the $115,000 flagship model. He admired the aggressive exterior lines, then reached out to pull the door handle to inspect the interior trim. The door was locked. For a brief moment, the silent showroom felt even larger. From her elevated desk on the far side of the showroom, Linda, the senior floor manager, had been watching him. Linda had spent a decade in luxury retail and prided herself on being the showroom's gatekeeper. The moment she saw Desmond in a hoodie walking across the marble floor, her mind had already made its decision. She walked across the showroom floor with her arms strictly crossed, projecting a wall of cold corporate hostility. "Excuse me, sir," Linda said, her voice tight and heavily layered with fake customer service politeness. "I'm going to have to ask you to step back from the vehicle. We try to keep the exterior free of fingerprints for our scheduled clients." Desmond turned, keeping his composure. "Good morning. I was hoping to get a look at the interior. Does this specific model have the upgraded leather package?" Linda didn't answer his question. "These specific models are usually viewed by appointment only," Linda stated smoothly. "We like to keep the mileage and interior pristine." "I understand," Desmond replied, "but I'm actually looking to purchase a vehicle today. Are you a sales associate? Could you unlock it for me?" Linda's fake smile faltered. "I am the senior floor manager," she answered, her posture going completely rigid. "And as I stated, access to the flagship tier isn't open to just anyone walking in off the street. Our policy strictly requires a verified financial pre-approval on file, or a massive deposit." "You haven't asked for my name," Desmond said quietly. "You haven't checked the system to see if I have an appointment. You haven't asked for my ID to check if I have a pre-approval on file." Linda let out a short, condescending sigh. She shifted her weight, dropping the facade just enough. "Sir, let's not play games," Linda said, her voice dropping to a harsh, mocking whisper. "Vehicles at this price point are typically reserved for clients with verified financing. You're making the actual customers uncomfortable. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Desmond simply reached into the pocket of his hoodie, pulled out his smartphone, and tapped the record button. Two sales associates near the reception desk had stopped pretending to organize paperwork. They were watching the confrontation unfold in uncomfortable silence. "Could you repeat that?" Desmond asked, holding the phone at chest level. "Could you clarify your policy on who gets to view these vehicles?" Linda's eyes widened and her expression hardened. Recording staff inside the showroom is against our policy. If you don't leave immediately, I'll have the police remove you for trespassing. I am a customer attempting to make a purchase in a public retail space, Desmond replied. Call them. Linda grabbed her phone from her desk and dialed the non-emergency line for the local police precinct that handled the commercial district. She looked Desmond dead in the eye, fully confident that the system would back her up. Yes, dispatch, this is Linda, senior manager at North Shore Motors, she said, her voice dripping with manufactured victimhood. I have a hostile individual refusing to leave the showroom floor. He is harassing the staff. I need an officer here immediately. She lowered the phone and smiled a cold, triumphant smile. She thought she had just won. She had no idea that every word she had just spoken was now recorded and would soon be reviewed by corporate executives, lawyers, and eventually thousands of people online. When police respond to a trespassing call from a luxury business, the script is usually already written. The assumption is that the business owner is the victim and the person being asked to leave is the aggressor. Linda knew this. She was counting on the police to remove him, using a badge and a uniform as her personal customer service filter. 12 minutes after her call, a patrol cruiser pulled into the pristine parking lot of North Shore Motors. A single patrolman, Officer Hayes, stepped out and adjusted his duty belt. As he walked through the heavy glass doors, the tension in the showroom was palpable. Linda didn't wait for the officer to assess the room. She immediately intercepted him, playing her role to perfection. "Officer, thank you for getting here so quickly," Linda said, her voice pitched to convey distress, but keeping her professional posture. She pointed toward the center of the showroom. "That individual has been harassing my staff. I've asked him to leave the property, and he is refusing to comply. We have high-profile clients coming in, and he is causing a severe disturbance." Officer Hayes nodded, his expression neutral. He had responded to dozens of calls like this. He looked over at Desmond. Desmond wasn't yelling. He wasn't pacing. He was standing exactly where he had been 10 minutes ago, his hands out of his pockets, holding nothing but his smartphone. Hayes walked across the marble floor, approaching Desmond with the controlled stride of someone used to handling tense situations. "Sir," Officer Hayes said, his voice firm and projecting across the quiet room, "the manager of this establishment is stating that you are no longer welcome on the property. I need you to step away from the vehicle, and we're going to step outside. This is the moment where most people let their ego take over. They argue with the police, they raise their voice, and they immediately give the officer a legal reason to detain them for disorderly conduct. But Desmond didn't let his ego dictate his actions. He understood the procedural reality of the situation perfectly. "Of course, officer," Desmond replied smoothly, his voice devoid of any aggression. He immediately took 3 steps back from the $115,000 SUV, demonstrating total physical compliance. "I have no problem stepping outside, but before I leave this showroom floor, I want to make a statement for your body camera." Hayes had heard that line before. Everyone suddenly cared about body cameras when things weren't going their way. He briefly glanced down at the small camera clipped to the center of his vest. The green indicator light was on. "You're being recorded, sir. Go ahead," Hayes said, his tone flat. "I am here to purchase a vehicle," Desmond stated clearly, looking directly at the officer's camera lens. "I was standing quietly. The manager, Linda, refused to unlock the door. She didn't ask for my name or my ID. I'm being asked to leave a public showroom because the manager assumed I couldn't afford the vehicle based on how I look." Linda, standing a few feet behind the officer, couldn't help herself. Her arrogance overrode her common sense. "Because we have policies," she interjected loudly. "We don't just let anyone—" "Ma'am, please let him finish," Officer Hayes said, raising a hand without turning around. She stated that vehicles at this price point are reserved for clients with verified financing, Desmond continued, his voice remaining level. "I have her entire statement recorded on my phone. I am complying with your order to leave the building, officer. But I want the reason for my removal documented." The showroom was dead silent. one of the sales associates quietly stepped behind the reception desk, pretending to check something on the computer while watching the exchange. Officer Hayes looked at the calm man in the hoodie, and then turned to look at the senior manager in the expensive navy suit. Hayes suddenly realized this wasn't a simple trespassing call anymore. He wasn't going to just drag a compliant man out the door without getting the full picture. Hayes turned slightly toward Linda. "Ma'am," Officer Hayes said, his voice dropping to a more serious, investigative tone. "I'm going to need you to step outside as well. I'm going to need to hear exactly what happened." Linda's triumphant smile finally vanished. For the first time that morning, she realized the police were no longer just taking her word for it. Standard police procedure for any business dispute is immediate separation. You don't interview two conflicting parties while they are standing next to each other. The heavy glass doors of North Shore Motors slid open, and the three of them stepped out into the bright, crisp morning air. Officer Hayes instructed Linda to stand near the entrance of the showroom. He then guided Desmond about 30 feet away, toward the front bumper of the patrol cruiser. "All right, sir. Do you have your ID on you?" Officer Hayes asked. His tone was professional, but still carried the baseline skepticism of a cop responding to a disturbance. Desmond didn't argue. He calmly reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and handed over his state driver's license. "I have my ID," Desmond said evenly. Then he reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out the thick white envelope he had been holding inside. He extended it toward the officer. "And since the manager was so concerned about my ability to pay, I have my verified financing right here." Hayes took the envelope, expecting to see a printed email from a credit union, or maybe a generic pre-approval letter that dealerships usually reject anyway. He opened the flap and slid out the single piece of heavy stock paper inside. He unfolded it. It wasn't a credit application. It had watermarks and security threads. Officer Hayes' eyes scanned the top line. Cashier's check. He dropped his gaze to the payee line. Pay to the order of North Shore Motors. Then he looked at the amount box. $115,000. Hayes stopped breathing for a fraction of a second. As a patrol officer, he dealt with bad checks, stolen credit cards, and petty fraud all the time. But a cashier's check is different. A cashier's check means the bank has already locked down the cash. The man standing in front of him wasn't holding a promise to pay. He was holding the exact, guaranteed equivalent of a briefcase filled with $115,000 in cash. Hayes looked up from the piece of paper, staring at the man in the plain black hoodie and running shoes. Desmond simply looked back, his expression completely unreadable. "Sir," Hayes said, his voice dropping an octave, completely losing any trace of its previous skepticism. "You came here to buy the car outright." "It's my wife's anniversary next week," Desmond replied quietly. "I was going to pay in full and drive it off the lot today, but apparently I don't fit the dress code." Hayes carefully folded the check, slid it back into the envelope, and handed it, along with the driver's license, back to Desmond. The officer turned and looked across the parking lot at Linda. She was standing by the glass doors, her arms crossed tight against her chest, a look of smug impatience on her face. She was waiting for the officer to hand Desmond a formal trespass warning so she could go back to her marble floor. Hayes walked the 30 feet back to the entrance. He didn't look angry, he just looked tired of dealing with people's self-inflicted disasters. "Ma'am," Officer Hayes said, stopping a few feet from Linda, "you stated that your policy requires verified financing to view those vehicles." "Exactly," Linda said, nodding quickly, eager to have her authority validated. "We don't just open the doors for anyone off the street. It's a security measure." Hayes looked at her for a long moment. He didn't give her a speech about civil rights. He didn't yell. He just delivered the cold, procedural facts. "That gentleman," Hayes said, pointing a thumb back over his shoulder toward Desmond, "has a certified bank check in his pocket for $115,000. It is already made out to this dealership. Linda's arms slowly uncrossed. The smug, confident expression on her face didn't just fade, it shattered. Linda stammered, her voice suddenly sounding very small. She looked past the officer at Desmond, who was still standing calmly by the cruiser. He didn't tell me that. He said you didn't ask, Hayes replied flatly. He said you told him someone like him wouldn't be approved for a loan. Linda opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The blood completely drained from her face. The sheer catastrophic magnitude of what she had just done was hitting her all at once. She hadn't just profiled a customer, she had publicly humiliated a cash buyer, and she had done it in front of witnesses, on camera, and filed a false police report to cap it off. Hayes keyed his radio to let dispatch know the scene was secure, then looked back at the manager. "Ma'am," Hayes said, his voice entirely devoid of sympathy. "You might want to call the owner." 10 minutes later, the heavy glass doors of the showroom opened again. Robert, the dealership's general manager, stepped out into the parking lot. He had been in his upstairs office and only came down when one of the sales associates frantically texted him about the police cruiser out front. Robert approached Officer Hayes with the practiced, smooth confidence of a luxury salesman used to smoothing over minor inconveniences. "Officer, I'm the general manager. Is everything under control?" Robert asked, glancing between the patrol car and Linda, who was standing stiffly near the entrance. Linda mentioned we had a trespasser causing a disturbance. Officer Hayes didn't match the manager's smile. Police officers generally don't appreciate being used to handle bad customer service, and they especially don't like being dragged into civil rights violations. "There was no disturbance, sir," Officer Hayes replied, his voice flat and procedural. He gestured toward Desmond, who was standing quietly by the cruiser. "Your floor manager called 911 to trespass that gentleman. I've spoken with him and verified his identification." Robert looked at Desmond, a black man in a plain hoodie and running shoes. Robert's eyes darted back to his manager, implicitly trusting her judgment. "I see. Well, we have strict security policies regarding the flagship inventory. If he was refusing to leave..." "He wasn't refusing to leave, sir. He was trying to buy a car," Hayes interrupted, keeping his tone entirely objective. "He showed me a certified cashier's check for $115,000. It is already made payable to North Shore Motors." Robert stopped mid-sentence. The smooth, practiced confidence vanished from his face instantly. In the car business, a cashier's check is the holy grail. It means zero financing delays, zero bank fees, and an instant massive bump to the monthly quota. Robert slowly turned his head to look at Linda. Linda took a step forward, her voice defensive and trembling. "Robert, he didn't present it. He was dressed like... He didn't look like our standard clientele. I was just following the security protocols for the high-end section. I told him we need verified financing." "Did you ask for his name?" Robert asked, his voice dropping into a dangerous, quiet register. "Well, no, but..." "Did you ask if he had financing before you told him he couldn't look at the car?" Linda swallowed hard. She looked at the police officer, realizing she couldn't lie. "I used my professional judgment." At that moment, Desmond walked over. He didn't look angry. He didn't look smug. He just looked like a man who had entirely dismantled the situation and was ready to deliver the final piece of evidence. "Mr. Manager," Desmond said calmly, "your employee didn't use professional judgment. She used racial profiling." Desmond held up his smartphone. He didn't shout, he just tapped the screen. The audio played loudly in the quiet parking lot, crisp and undeniable. Linda's condescending, sneering voice echoed from the phone's speaker. "Sir, let's not play games. Vehicles at this price point are typically reserved for clients with verified financing. We both know that someone like you isn't going to be approved for a $115,000 loan." The recording clicked off. The silence that followed was suffocating. Robert closed his eyes. He wasn't just looking at a lost $115,000 cash sale. He was looking at a textbook violation of the Civil Rights Act. He was looking at a recording that, if posted online, would generate millions of views, trigger protests outside his showroom, and cause the corporate brand to pull their franchise license overnight. Linda had just put the entire multi-million-dollar business at risk because she didn't like a customer's hoodie. "Officer," Robert said, his voice entirely hollow as he opened his eyes. "Are there any criminal charges being filed here today?" "No, sir," Officer Hayes replied. "Mr. Ross was entirely compliant. Since he has been trespassed by your staff, he is leaving the property. I'll be filing an incident report documenting the interaction, and my body camera footage will be uploaded to the precinct servers by end of shift." It was the worst possible answer for the dealership. It meant there was now an official, unalterable government record of the discrimination, accessible by subpoena to any civil rights lawyer Desmond chose to hire. Robert turned to Desmond. The manager's posture completely collapsed into desperate damage control. "Mr. Ross, please, let's go into my office. Let me personally handle this sale. I will offer you a massive discount on that vehicle right now. We can make this right." Desmond looked at the general manager, then looked at Linda, who was now staring at the pavement, her career flashing before her eyes. Desmond didn't smile. He didn't look triumphant. He just looked profoundly disappointed. He looked down at the $115,000 cashier's check in his hand, folded it neatly, and slid it back into the heavy white envelope. "I came here ready to pay the full sticker price today," Desmond said, his voice completely level. "But I don't do business with places that treat me like a threat before I even say hello." Robert took a step forward, practically pleading. "Mr. Ross, please understand, this isn't how we operate. This is an isolated incident. Let me make this right." Desmond turned away from the general manager and looked directly at Linda. She was staring at the asphalt, completely unable to meet his eyes. "I'll take my business somewhere else," Desmond said quietly. He didn't wait for a response. Desmond turned, walked across the parking lot to his car, and drove away. Officer Hayes watched him leave, then turned to the general manager, gave a brief, respectful nod, and got back into his patrol cruiser. The incident was documented. The rest was now a civil matter. In the quiet of the parking lot, Robert finally turned to his senior floor manager. He didn't scream. Corporate executions are rarely loud. They are swift, cold, and absolute. "Give me your showroom keys and your security badge," Robert said, holding out his hand without looking away from her. Linda looked up, her eyes welling with tears of panic. "Robert, please, I've been here for a decade. I was just trying to protect the inventory. You know the kind of people that come around here just to—" "Stop talking," Robert interrupted, his voice shaking with suppressed rage. "You didn't protect anything. You just handed a massive racial discrimination lawsuit to corporate on a silver platter, and you forced a police officer to record it. Give me the badge, Linda. Pack your desk. You're done." For years, Linda believed her job was to decide who belonged in that showroom and who didn't. Instead, she was just guarding her own unemployment. That same afternoon, Desmond Ross drove 3 miles down the road to a competing luxury dealership. He walked in wearing the exact same black hoodie. He was greeted immediately, offered a coffee, and treated like a professional. An hour later, he handed them the cashier's check and drove off the lot in a brand new $120,000 flagship SUV. As for Linda, she wasn't just fired. When the body cam footage and Desmond's audio recording were inevitably reviewed by corporate HR, her termination was officially flagged as a severe violation of civil rights and anti-discrimination policies. In the insular, highly connected world of high-end automotive sales, a flag like that on your professional record means it becomes extremely difficult to find another management position in luxury automotive sales. Accountability doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just a man in a hoodie, quietly walking away with his money, leaving you alone with the catastrophic consequences of your own prejudice. If you made it to the end of this breakdown, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever seen a business lose a massive amount of money because of a manager's ego? Drop your stories below, hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next review.
Our review is now complete. For more unedited field recordings, remember to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching Bodycam Incident Reports.